Being called to order here, and first order of business is public comment.
No one online, but we have someone here in person who would like to give a few words. So Jim, please feel free to pop up to the table. Try to limit these to 2 to 3 minutes if so. But
Great.
thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about Invest Bend. I'm Jim Tolles. I live here in the city of Bend, and I'm just loving this future focus because we need to focus on the future. So much is changing. We all know this. Society's changing, economies are changing, politics is in turmoil, climate is changing. And I've been doing a big step back in my own research just personally. And one of the things I do feel we can trust that we still need to keep the lights on. There's a new energy economy coming. We all know this. There's all sorts of political headwinds in different directions, but the Trump administration actually has continuity with the Biden administration. Please don't let your jaws hit the floor. This is actually happening around a couple different things that we may want to consider inviting into our economy, and that's fusion energy, enhanced geothermal systems, which we have actually a test going on out near Newberry, and fission's making a comeback with the first permitted nuclear fission power plant in Wyoming in 40 years being driven by Bill Gates. These are big ecosystems. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of different levels, depending on what this council and what City of Bend wants to do and where we want to go. Whether we're talking about sustainable resources extraction, which is a dirty secret, we don't look at the mining and the extraction process that happen with every industry, whether it's somewhere in the supply chain, whether we want to be in the forefront of fusion energy. I wouldn't say the absolute forefront because Washington State, California, other places are already driving hard on this. $8 billion of private equity has come into fusion energy in the last several years. This is a real thing. They've proven that you can get more energy out than put in since 2022. And there's the startups, and then do we want a reactor? Because in the world of utility scale stuff, you plan those things decades in advance. Like if we want a reactor in 2035, we start thinking about how do we adjust our regulations now. So these are opportunities that it just feels like it's such a perfect timing with what you're doing with Invest Bend. And I want to bring these to your attention. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to people with some of the research I've done.
Great, thank you. Thank you. All right, and sitting in for Meg is Russ.
Next to you, even though you're gonna do it.
I just thought the reason why I punted this to Russ is that I thought it was a really good summary of what we have done on council and what's coming up for the rest of the year. And I know that a lot of the times we talk about getting BDAB involved in things, you know, well in advance of them actually happening. And this way you can actually see some of the key work sessions that we're going to be having. And some of the things that we're going to be talking about over the next 6 months or so.
All right.
Thank
Ready?
you, Russ.
Here we go. I was like slamming pizza.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. So this was just presented to council at their meeting last week, just as a kind of a summary of what occurred over the last biennium. Not going to go through all of this, but basically there were 5 goals, 13 strategies, and 49 action items. 43 of which of those were completed. A lot of those are multi-year endeavors, so a lot of them actually getting pulled forward into this current biennium. I'm just going to scroll through these really quick. These are just gives you a highlight. I'm not going to go through all these of what got accomplished over the last biennium. This was in accessible and effective government. When you look at the pinwheel up there around council goals, affordable housing and sustainable development. You just read through these. A lot of work being done, environment and climate, including the tree code and a lot of other fun things, public safety. I'm going to get into more detail here, and then transportation infrastructure. Major things that BDAB was involved in, like the STC methodology and the transportation fee. Looking at just growth and infrastructure, and this is where the majority of that presentation was last week. Just going to go over what projects got completed over the last couple of years, what's coming, what's under construction and under design. And then we've got a whole bunch of policy discussions that are going to be occurring over the next 2 years. And we're outlining the first kind of 6 months of those work sessions for council when these discussions are going to take place. So just looking at what got built over the past 2 years on city projects, just going to move through these really quick. So Newport Avenue got completed
That won in a project with the Oregon chapter of the American Public Works Association back in 2023. Wilson got fully completed over the past 2 years, culminating in the improvements at Third and Wilson. That Purcell Boulevard corridor, including the Neff Purcell intersection, got completed. Greenwood, which I know a lot of people have different varied opinions on, that was completed. We just finished and had the celebration on Second Street. That was using urban renewal funds out of the core area to build that.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you remember what it used to look like.
And one of the key, this is one setting the table for that area, but also it's given a vision, right? So it's kind of making people understand, oh, what we're trying to sit there. And in most of these areas, when you have major redevelopment, usually you need these big infrastructure projects to try to help create a sense of place. Only in Wall, that got opened up, as well as Portland. I know many people are happy about that getting opened up. We're still working on the rest of it from Wall Street up to Second Street. And then also, I always like this picture because it shows the size of infrastructure that the city deals with. This was the Aubrey water line, which is basically a brand new 16-inch water line that went from the intersection of Mount Washington and Shevlin Park all the way up through Aubrey and down through that second only intersections and continued on only right now, eventually heading over to Pilot Butte. But this really is one of the most critical pieces of water infrastructure that the city needed to be able to move water effectively around the city. And it just kind of gives you the size and scale of what we deal with. Same time, we're doing septic to sewer extensions throughout the city, but this one was of real importance on Ferguson because not only was it continuing our septic to sewer program, but it's also setting up the southeast area for sewer because we're building a lift station right now, and this was the outfall for that lift station. We also do water line replacement projects all over town. I'll talk about one up on Stat Street that's currently under construction downtown. Same time, we are continuing to fix and repair and maintain our infrastructure. So this is inside one of our water reservoirs. You can see the existing condition on the left. We go in there and we do recoding on the right. This is just ongoing maintenance and repairs that needs to be done. And then at the same time, even though this wasn't all city funding, there was only a small project on the north side of town, $109 million North Corridor project that also got completed that the city was heavily involved in because it had such an impact on the city system. And also, when we negotiated the Costco, they actually basically funded about one and a half roundabouts on Highway 20 and started the whole conversation on getting roundabouts on Highway 20. That's been going on for over a decade. Moving on to what's current and upcoming. So this is a current picture of our Public Works campus up at Juniper Ridge that's being constructed. So we're moving our water services, transportation, mobility, engineering, and fleet groups up to Juniper Ridge in a brand new facility. At the same time, we're building an air traffic control tower at the Bend Airport. This is a picture of that southeast area lift station that is creating basically there was no sewer down in this area, and the city, working with council, came through and put that big initial investment just to get sewer in the area to allow development to occur in the southeast area, which is an expansion area of town. And then here's an ongoing list of other projects that are currently under construction. I talked about Olney from Wall to Second. Bear Creek and 27th is under construction right now. The Stats water line replacement. A lot of other septic to sewer projects going on. We're decommissioning and rehabbing several lift stations around, including one called the West Side Lift Station that's over by Portland. That work got coordinated with the Portland construction. That only pumps about 1 million gallons a day of sewer across the river. At the same time, we're making improvements and maintenance out at a water reclamation facility out by the airport. And there's several private development projects going around town right now. I'm sure everyone's aware that Skyline Ranch and Skyliners is closed. That's part of the West Side Improvement Agreement for the West Side expansion areas that the developers needed to build to connect Skyline Ranch Road from Shevlin Park over to Skyliners. And then out at Petrosa, the developers making improvements to Yeoman Road. So Yeoman's going to basically connect to 18th Street, and you're going to be able to take that all the way past the Chutes Market Road and connect into Petrosa on the north side of that development. Probably it's under construction right now. We were just talking about when that roundabout's going to open. And then currently with the Jackstraw project, Industrial Way and Sizemore Street is getting constructed to help circulation in that area. What's coming over the next 12 months, if we didn't have enough going on, Wilson and Cooley Safe Railroad Crossing improvements are gonna be going in. The Bend Bikeways is gonna start construction. We're gonna be doing bike and ped improvements on Butler Market. Franklin Avenue between 4th and 8th Streets. That per discussion with council, we're gonna move forward with that section of Franklin. The Galveston corridor is back. Galveston corridor is back on the radar. That was probably gonna be going into construction next week. Ferguson and 15th Street roundabout is on the city's schedule to be constructed, and that's being coordinated with the roundabout that a developer needs to build at Ferguson and 27th. And then the Neff corridor improvements, including improving bike ped in that area. The image to the right is just kind of a geographical representation of where all these projects are. So everyone will be affected. We try to make sure that can affect every part of town. What's going into design? The Reed Market rail overcrossing, that project is in design. Same with the expanded Reed Market and 15th roundabout. Those are GeoBond projects. We're currently in design and having discussions with council around Franklin Avenue between Hill and 4th Street. The On A Road extension, which is trying to utilize the most underutilized underpass that exists on Highway 97 and get that connected through the system. We have 4 intersections on Revere that are going to be improved by 3rd Street. We're in design on the riverfront street improvements with BPRD. Got a whole nother host of safety projects coming through, and we're moving into the next wave of what we call the South Aubrey Butte Drainage Project to resolve some existing drainage issues we have in Aubrey Butte. And then kind of the Keystone project is, we were just in discussions with ODOT this morning. That project is in design. Kickoff meeting started last week with their consultants on the Hawthorne bike and pedestrian overcrossing. As we do that, we're also planning our infrastructure, which is the kind of our core documents that tell us kind of how our current system's running, and then that is the basis for how we grow as well. So we're right in the middle of updating our collection system, our sewer master plan, and our stormwater master plan, and we're doing facility plans for both our wastewater reclamation facility out by the airport and our main water filtration plant, which is called Outback, which is out by Phil's Trail, up off of Skyliners. Same time, we're in negotiations with the U.S. Forest Service to buy more property out for our water filtration system because of those facility needs that are going to be needed over the next 20 to 40 years. Everybody okay so far?
Were you gonna repeat exactly what he's saying?
Heck no.
Um,
He does it so much better.
On the development side, this just kind of what occurred over the past couple of years. We did the one-time site selection for the 100-acre one-time UGB expansion that was allowed by state, some legislation that came out of the state. That was Caldera Ranch down in the southeast part of town. Completed the Stevens Road Track concept plan. We're now in discussions with the developer on trying to make that work. So that's that second half of the Department of State Lands section where to the east of Stevens Ranch, off of 27th. The Ponderosa UGB expansion area, that area is now under construction. That's way down on the south part of town, just to the west of Highway 97 as you leave the south part of town. The wildfire master plan was modified and they're in construction right now. That's that activity you see at 15th and Wilson. That's a lot of multifamily units going in there. And then we also went through 2 rounds and created the site-specific tax increment financing program, which I know that BDAB is aware of, and there are going to be future discussions around next steps of that. Code updates. Won't go into a bunch of this, but we did a bunch of housing updates, including the tree code. Just recently, they approved the second ADUs in row housing. We updated the sign code, parking code, changed how council appeal processes work, removed prohibited new auto-dependent uses in convenience commercial, among other things. Then what's upcoming on private development projects, the OSU is modifying their master plan. That's coming back next month. Caldera Ranch UGB expansion area, we are in discussions with them to move that forward into master plan and annexation. Same as with the Stevens Track UGB expansion area I just talked about. Caraway master plan on the north end of town, that's north of Cooley. That's also in discussions again. The timber yards, which is the Core Pine area right by Crux, they're most likely coming in for a modification. We've got a lot of activity now in the southeast area, UGB expansion area being set up, one, because sewer's there. That southeast area lift station I talked about, that sets the stage for development to move forward. And then we just heard there's another master plan coming in on Murphy and 15th, just north of Alpenglow Park as well. Right? Good?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. Then here are the upcoming council policy discussions, which I'm sure BDAB will be weighing in on some of these. We've already started the conversation about updating our transportation standards, also having a look at what the development infrastructure requirements are, especially around infill development. So there's been a lot of discussions on what do they build a street in front of them? We have different scenarios in different places, and we're going to outline what our development code is and then what infrastructure requirements are needed. Do we create payment in lieu programs for sidewalks or other type of infill development? We're going to be having a lot of conversations over the next couple of months on Midtown. So that's Franklin, Hawthorne, and Greenwood on what our next steps are. We just had a conversation with council on the Franklin project, and we're trying to figure out what are we doing between Hill and 4th Street. And that is not only a timing conversation, but also a coordination with the Hawthorne project. Because right now we have money to do the bridge, but we have not allocated money to do the connections to the bridge on either side. Thank you. See, that's it. So we want to have conversations with that and also make sure we understand what, if any, we are doing on Greenwood as well, because we're coming back to have that 1 year kind of review on Greenwood. We're also going to be in September, at the end of September, we're going to be starting having conversations with council on making sure that we've got our prioritizations set correctly around all the future transportation projects that are coming in. So it goes into our geo bonds. We have money allocated for ODOT projects. If you haven't heard, ODOT's having some funding problems. So we're trying to make sure what we do with that. There's been interest in additional safety projects. So we want to have a big kind of conversation of setting the table of where are we focused with our dollars and projects going forward. You'll probably be hearing conversations around urban renewal areas and kind of what are the next steps for Juniper Ridge, core area, and Murphy. Also, there's discussions about an Empire specific urban renewal area. Be having discussions on if we want to modify and continue the site-specific TIF program that just went through 2 rounds of review. The tree code's coming back for a review. We're starting a housing funding group to look at what's the next step to provide more housing throughout the community. And then that culminates then with a look over the next 3 to 4 years on our 20-year growth plan, which basically touches every document that we have and is a big conversation with the community. If you're interested in that, I will push you back to the council, go to the council website and watch Brian Rankin's presentation on the growth plan, because he gave a very good synopsis of how all that comes together and what that is trying to achieve.
I'll share that presentation.
And then in terms of the work sessions that are coming up, basically between now and the end of the year, we're kind of highlighted here. So on August 18th, really, we started having that conversations about green market and bond. That roundabout, you probably have heard that in the newspaper and the media. There's a lot of interest from some neighborhoods in the area to move that project forward. So we're bringing that back to the table to see what our next steps are there. Then we move into at the community building subcommittee, having updates on our collective system master plan, also bring back information on private development engineering reviews, because that's been a focus of interest in the development world. Then you see September 15th is a big check-in around all Midtown crossings. So Greenwood, Franklin, and Hawthorne. Then we start having that funding conversation at the end of September on CIP funding prioritization. Then we go to the quarterly update on October 13th, which is going to be focused around economic prosperity. That's where we're going to have conversations around the tree code. Is it working? Is it not? Do we want to tweak it? Stay status quo? Then November 3rd, we'll give an update on Reed Market, which is the big bridge over crossing, and then really start to go into the policy conversations on the transportation standards. November 17th, come back and have a discussion about City Hall, really around kind of the different delivery models and affordability that we have, that in the idea of taking that into the Bend Central District as a catalyst. And then December 1st, transit update from CET, and really start having that home funding group check in with council. Then we'll start it all again the following year.
Done.
So is that what you wanted me to cover?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think this is really helpful. So you can see and make sure to check in if there are things that you're interested in following or are having input in. I will say that as of the second meeting in August, our council schedule is changing. And while it's fun to have 7-hour meetings, the freshest work is not often done at 10:30 at night. So we will actually be taking the work session and doing it on the Monday before the council meeting. The time is still TBD, in flux, yes. That'll be, updated on the website when we do have it. So work sessions will be Monday afternoon to early evening. And the council meetings, the business meetings will start at 6, not 7. And with the goal of finishing up by 9-ish. I'm saying ish a lot, but just so you know, in case you're interested, if you want to watch the work sessions, those are going to be on the Monday, and then the business meeting will be on the Wednesday. So
I had a question. I do a lot of public transit infrastructure, huge projects. So I know that time frame, but you talked about several infrastructure projects and tying back to the public comment that I appreciated having this morning. Give us a sense of when some of those plans some of those things that you're working on or finishing up now, when that all started.
When did it all start?
When did it all
geez.
start? Just to give us all an idea.
Well, it was a dark and
We're
stormy
talking
night.
about-
So the big conversations really started back in, I would say, 2016. So actually probably prior to the recession, if you want the full history, but we were doing that UGB expansion that was occurring. It was a very large expansion. We submitted it right before the recession. The state came back and said, no, that's not what we're looking for. Try again. Went through the recession. That conversation came back around 2013, 2014. We started to have that again, which culminated in the 2016 urban growth plan expansion being approved and our comprehensive plan being updated. That led into a 2020 update to our transportation system plan, and also our other master plans, our collection system master plan and our water master plan. Those are our guiding documents in terms of priorities and focus, and especially transportation is the one that everyone can really kind of more, I think, understand. That really sets the policy, and then it starts to lay out the projects that you do. And then we have a prioritization of those projects. That then, once that was approved, that also gave a funding kind of policy that we had, which said, go look at a geo bond, go update your system development charges, look at a transportation fee, which we've just kind of followed that playbook, right? So we did in 2020, the geo bond went through, that 190 million geo bond. And that's our playbook now that we've been doing over the last 10 year, over a 10-year process to build those projects and then continue to find funding for those other things. So they're all related to those core documents. And when you think about go back to the growth plan, as a community, that is the time to get involved, because that really determines where we're going up, where we're going out, what the systems look like. I always say, when you see the big yellow machines showing up in your backyard, too late, right? So if you're really interested in how the city is going to grow from 105, 110,000 people to 145, 150,000 people, when you hear we're probably going to rebrand it at some point, but when you hear growth plan or the growth management group, pay attention. That's the time to get involved.
yeah, a lot of times people say, like, they think, that council just decided, okay, well, we're going to rip up that street tomorrow, whereas there's about, 10 years of work prior to that and planning, that went in, and engagement, that went in. So yeah, it's a long process from start to finish.
Yeah.
Given the unstable economic forecasting, is there anything that you have planned that you're concerned about that could be at risk?
Is E all the above?
Yeah. I mean, that's what the prioritization really is,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if you look at, just on this list, there is risk everywhere, right? We are seeing cost overruns, left and right. We're trying to understand tariffs, understand what that policy may or may not do. You look at that housing funding group, that's a big discussion, because we've really pulled all the levers that, I'm going to say a majority of the levers that you can pull in terms of setting the table, whether it's codes, allowing all the middle housing to come in, removing parking minimums. Like, the table's set and there's still gaps, right? So that's when you started to create these programs, like the site specific tip for the MUPD programs, was to get more things moving. Those conversations are going to continue for sure over the next couple of years, because we don't see any clarity in kind of policy and or just economics that's going to say, yeah, everyone's going to be clear sailing. I can't even imagine what, even when you look at the site specific tip projects that came through, when you're sitting in a developer's office with a contractor trying to figure out whether you're going to pull the trigger on a project, there's a lot of factors at play right now, right? And all we're trying to do as a city is to try to make things as clear as possible, to say, here's how long it's gonna take, here's what we're doing, here's what we're bringing to the table, whether it's infrastructure or incentives or things like that. And to try to get that information to you so you can make the best business decision you can. But that is always change. It's a changing environment on a daily basis. And I think the next presentation is going to go into some of that as well.
Yeah.
And lessons learned from the recession, right? You know, not to stop building, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what we don't want to do, because that created a hole that we're still trying to get out of.
And we're still trying to, we're always, because we've grown so fast, we're always in a catch-up mode on things.
Question on, House Bill, it's tied to House Bill 3395, which was to allow 4-story buildings with a single exit up to 4 apartments over 4,000 square feet. Did you guys adopt that? Because it's up to the jurisdiction, or do you know which way?
I think we are in conversations.
We will have an actual work session with CAB at the
Okay.
end of August for that specific.
Yeah. And there's also other conversations that aren't even here yet, where on the building code side on wildfire resiliency.
Yeah,
Do we
that's
not only change some of our development code standards for vegetation, fencing, those type of things, but do we want to take that optional leap in the building code to be more resilient? Yep.
Jen Lynch has her hand raised. Go ahead, Jen.
Can you say more about how businesses can get involved with the Greenwood Quick Build feedback process, given that that's coming up soon?
So yeah, right now the survey's still open. So if you go out there, there's a billboard and it's probably online somewhere. I can't point it to you that says, give us your feedback. So we would like to get as much feedback as we can. We are taking counts on that right now. So we're taking active traffic counts on all modes of travel so we can actually bring back real data to figure out what we want to do on that project.
And I would definitely suggest watching the September 15th work session and either emailing council or doing a public comment at the meeting immediately following. That would be at the business meeting. That would be helpful too.
But I'll give you another connection to that in terms of some other things that we're talking about. So if you look at, because we knew when we closed the Portland Wall intersection, that's going to be very impactful. And we looked at options, but there was no way because of the major underground piping that had to go through there, like that big 16-inch water line, hard to do and keep that intersection open. So we're actually having conversations with council on Franklin. Depending on what we do on Franklin, we would need anywhere between a 2 to 3 month to a 5 to 6 month closure of Franklin to do improvements in there. So it's not only an infrastructure question, it's also I would say a community tolerance.
The holy crap question.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can say that, right?
Yeah, and read market too, I think.
How these things are, because we know, like Greenwood is working much more effectively now because we have all 3 corridors open. I know everyone has various opinions on it, but compared to when Portland and Wall were closed, it's a lot different now. So it's the question of construction fatigue and other things and timing of these projects and also just priorities on what we do.
Yeah, and seeing them.
Yeah.
Seeing them as a whole too, not just, I think that's the other thing is when we were talking about Franklin, we started saying, okay, we need to take a step back and think about all 3 of these and how we want them to operate. And, this is my personal view, is one supposed to be more getting cars from point A to point B, and one is supposed to be a little bit more focused on bike infrastructure, so that's the conversation that we kind of need to have. So that, we talked a lot about like not having every street have to do everything, because that is very expensive and doesn't often work as well as we wanted it to. So
I think too, as we talk about Reed Market, you make an excellent point about how being there 10 years ago would have been the correct time to sort of weigh in on a lot of this. Obviously, businesses come and go. There's the set of folks who are going to be impacted by the specific timing and tempo of a project are the folks who are there now. And so making sure they have ways to engage and not feel, it doesn't do them any good to say you should have weighed in years ago when their business opened a year and a half ago and is being impacted today. And now we know the project's coming, but like something like Greenwood, like we're maybe getting started next week. That's all. That timing is also very relevant to how everyone is thinking about their business now and over the next couple of years.
Yeah, Reed Market is a great example. Like we're fully engaged with the business community out there, and there's been a lot of discussions in the preliminary design of what do we do with 9th Street? Can we make it connect? Do we need to shut it off? And all those, we're getting clearer visibility into that conversation, which we're going to bring back to council at that work session. But yeah, no, and we understand the impact it has on the community. It's just really hard to put $190 million worth of projects on the ground and not cause some disruption. So how do we do that most effectively and communicate as clearly as we can? That's why Cyrus knocks on a lot of doors.
So that, I don't see anything on here about, like livability or, reassessing like the parking minimums. Driving around town, which I get to do a lot of these days, but, the parking, relegated to two sides of all the streets all over, especially near, the new apartment buildings that have gone in. And from a public safety standpoint, like, you have to stop and wait and make sure there's nobody around the corner. And it's more difficult even on kind of a windier street where you really don't have the visibility. And it's, it's pedestrians, it's people trying to cross streets, it's bikers trying to cross streets. So, not asking for an answer, but then when we look at, Foster Rambler getting torn down and an entire building going up there. I read in the paper the Senator Brewing is gonna leave. And understandably, right, I mean, so from a community livability perspective, is council going back to those decisions about not having parking minimums and saying, what are we going to do? I mean, that project on Galveston's a great example, like what is the vision ultimately if we continue to approve those projects without parking?
So great, that's a great question. And let me put it in this context. We live in the state of Oregon. And the Oregon is from the state sets rules on how cities grow at a very high level. And those rules have changed a lot and they're changing. You're going to see more impact around this. So basically the state, we were ahead of the state, but basically the state is dictating that you basically remove all parking minimums on projects to encourage more density. The state's also saying you can't expand your transportation system very much. Even we can't afford to anyway. So that's why there's a lot of focus in these different modes of travel. How do we move people around town? There's a whole new set of rules called the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities that just got released from the state in 2023. We're going to be on the leading edge of trying to figure all this out in concert with our comprehensive plan and growth plan going forward. So, but the state's driving a lot of these policies. So that's one reason why we changed our parking code, because we need to be thinking more about parking districts and parking management. It's not gonna get, I know people don't like to hear this, but it's probably gonna get more congested and parking is gonna get harder to find in several areas of town. That is just a reality of kind of the universe of which we are in. And how the city is going to grow, not only from a state level, but also from the policy direction that we're getting from councils and others about how, how do we want to grow the city over the next 20, 30 years. Part of that is, I always use the Hawthorne Bridge as an example. In theory, there's going to be thousands of people that live on that east side of the rail. What we're trying to do with these systems is, if you want to go downtown and go to dinner, you're not going to get in your car and drive around the rail and the highway if you had a choice of walking a safe way across a bridge and getting there. We still want to be able to have people move by cars, because some people obviously need to and have to, but that's when we're in this transition to this different built environment, and there's going to be some struggles in there. And you look at things between density and parking, that's always a struggle. Trees and density, that's another struggle. It's really hard to go really dense and save trees. So how do we deal with it? And those are the fun conversations that we get to have with council over the next several years. But totally here, yeah, we're actually looking at parking districts and parking management strategies in different areas. It's not going to solve the problem, but we're just trying to manage it the best way that we possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, to Jen's point, I just making sure that you're engaging the business in those conversations so that they at least can plan ahead is.
Yep.
Just interesting to see kind of what's happening and, how the decisions are affecting small business. We can't, double-edged sword, right? We can't live without them either. And so their input's gonna be critical of all that stuff.
We actually had a really interesting conversation here on the Galveston project with the community building subcommittee, where you actually saw between the interested parties, because it was more of this kind of open discussion. You had, advocates for bike and pedestrian systems versus the businesses that are saying, I still got to get deliveries in, right? And so having those conversations are good, because understanding is good, and knowing you just can't jump from this kind of urban form to this urban form in one fell swoop. It's a transition that occurs over time. So how do we do that? And how do we build the best infrastructure we can with the dollars that we have, looking to the future, but knowing we have to survive today. Transit's a great example. You need the density to make transit work, but you need transit to support the density. So it's a chicken and the egg scenario. So how do you work your way through those problems?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Russ.
We solved everything?
Mayor Pro Tem Perkins,
Well, can I
Appreciate
just
the
say
updates.
thank you for all you've accomplished, it's really,
No, thanks. Thank the team. Yeah.
you think.
Okay, Invest Bend update.
I'm gonna change the tone a little bit and provide an update on where we're at with the Invest Spend campaign and process. And I've been very happy to have Katie on board for the past 3 weeks and get her up to speed with where we're at in the project, but it's been a little bit since this group has reviewed material and had different milestones and touch points in the process that we want to make sure BDAB is apprised of and can weigh in on. So that's what we're here to do today.
All right, so we've been kind of quiet for the last 2 months, but that's because we've been doing the demographic assessment, the livability assessment, and the economic assessment. We're about to begin our industry clusters, which is a work off of your target sectors that you did last year. So the difference between target sector and industry cluster is the target sector is the broad 2-3-digit NACES code. The industry cluster is actually supply chains associated with your large employers because they don't stand apart from being successful. So they need supply chains, they need service providers, et cetera. So that's what we're doing. Where we are, where we should be, and what's left, we actually should be around 51%. We are at 55% total project completion. The state of the housing is anticipated to be released between July 31st and August 8th. It's 90% completed. It's going through the internal review. The state of the housing is rental market affordability, homeownership affordability, demographic driver change, which we'll get into some of the data here in a second. The state of the economy, 80% complete. It's now going to go through internal review. We are starting our labor and industry cluster analysis, which is 10% completed. And then the actual strategy itself is 45% completed with our foundations, which is the vision and values that you saw in your staff packet, which is a draft. The landscape assessment, which is the state of the economy, state of housing, all rolled into the challenges and opportunities. The engagement, which is our stakeholder engagements, our focus groups, our interviews, our business survey. And then the core initiatives is the key components of the strategy of what we intend to either focus on and or accomplish. The Burr investment strategy is 50% completed because this is what started this whole process when we presented it to you in February and March. So I'm ahead of the game on the urban renewal aspect. So there are 2 recommendations that we would like. BDAB's solicitation today is we'd like you to authorize staff to create a focus group that provides a session on higher risk or underfunded businesses with a particular emphasis on minority-owned businesses. And recommendation 2 is to create a 4th opportunity for the Big Invest Bend focus group to meet, review, and provide a final recommendation on the actual investment strategy for you all to consider in October. The reason. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
A little bit of background on those recommendations. The first one was actually proposed by a BDAB member to say, can we add this additional opportunity for feedback and engagement with obviously a particular focus. And then the second one, as we were in the focus group sessions, it occurred to us that we weren't going to be able to provide sufficient time within those 3 sessions to really feel like we're turning all the stones over and making sure that everyone's feedback was incorporated into the strategy. So having them give all this time, but not necessarily being able to see the final product and give review was something that we heard some interest in having an opportunity to do so. So essentially just adding 2 different focus group sessions to the current work plan.
On the recommendation number 1, was it felt like there just wasn't enough of those folks involved or?
So the particular request was from Dwayne to ask if we could focus on minority-owned businesses in a certain aspect, and we'll get into some of the data reasonings why that request is made. But it's also to focus on not only minority-owned businesses, but any business that is perceived as higher risk or underfunded or marginalized. And so we want to be able to bring that request to you because staff can't just add a focus group. So because this is a BDAB project through beginning to end, we would need a request. And to build off of Cyrus's for the fourth opportunity, really what that is, as he was saying, is we want to be able to present that final draft invest bend economic development strategy to the focus group to let them to actually recommend it to BDAB, then BDAB debates, does what BDAB does, and then ultimately recommends it to city council for consideration. So it's just kind of adding a little bit more public transparency and stakeholder engagement to the overall process.
Can you remind us of the other three?
The other three, yeah, hold on. Handy, I'm known for a binder, so. So the first session was establishing our vision. So who we are and what do we bring? It's basically to allow the session to dream big for what they want Bend to be within the next decade. Cyrus did invite numerous businesses, but those businesses did not attend. So we want to be able to provide another opportunity for those businesses to engage. Session 2 is building off the foundation of 1, which is to develop the aspirations with foundational data to identify the vision and principle or guiding principles. Session 3 is once those core principles, values, and visions drafted, what are the focus areas, strategies, and example of objectives to get to that vision? And then 4th will be to review the final document to provide a recommendation.
So can you go back to yours? Go back. So how do you get to the goals piece that we're talking about here and be, 80 or 90% of some of this? I think that's
So-
where I'm seeing, that's where I'm.
Yeah, it's a great question. So most of the strategy is built on strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Most of the strategy is surrounded by data, and that's what we've been focused on. So now it's putting all those pieces together of how BDAB, City Council, the community wants to implement on those, what I would say, challenges. And we'll get into some of those here in a second.
Okay.
The remainder of this is actually putting the plan together. What's the focus groups? What's the objectives? What's the outcomes? Who are the partners?
So
Stuff like that.
basically, this is a request for a smaller group to review the document and bring their recommendations to the larger board.
So recommendation 1 is a specific.
One I understand.
Yeah, so recommendation 2 is to use the existing investment focus group as a final sounding board for the document.
Just adding a session. essentially. Yeah.
And we made some adjustments with the representation of industry between first and second session. As Jonathan mentioned, we had some struggles with participation, so we've had that addressed. In the second session, I think was a much better reflection of the business community, and thanks to Don and others who helped with that effort.
Great.
Did you draft the motion for this?
No,
Good.
no.
I have a question. Can you define the higher risk or underfunded businesses a little bit better, and how do you identify those?
So we have to operate in the confines of what the current administration is implying in terms of accessibility and equity. So we are internally working through that process right now of how to create a program that doesn't run afoul of federal administration policies.
The motion could be something as simple as I move to direct staff to move forward with the recommendations as presented.
Does it make sense to do that now or after? Because you said you have more data of what's come out of it, right? And I think there was stuff in the packets too, right?
Well, no, the reason we're asking the recommendations is because 1, we need to get it on people's schedules and calendars for August and September. And 2, it doesn't really change the timeline or outcome of the actual strategy. It's just making sure we get it out in time. And then plus it allows both Dwayne and Kathy, our internal communication stakeholder, to help facilitate some of these. So.
And I guess if not knowing what time or dollars are constrained by this, I don't think any amount of data is like negative to the process.
Okay.
So I would say I would be in favor of the 2 recommendations as proposed.
I'll second that.
Great.
Got it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
All right, now we'll get into the fun stuff that I like. Livability and economic snapshots. So what these are and what was provided to you in your staff packet is a brief summary of the state of the housing, state of the economy, and the livability and economic assessments that will be in the strategic plan. This is not all the data that you will come across over the next several months, but it kind of gives you an idea of where we're heading and what we're doing currently. So fun fact, U-Haul released its growth in metro cities of 2024, and Bend was the top metro in Oregon for in-migration, but also was the 19th top metro in the country. The reason is Bend grew by 4.73% since 2023. Net migration accounts for 88% of population growth, with 60% of those born in a different state, with 5% of residents born abroad. The top two states, Oregon, obviously, with the Portland metro area, and then Southern California. Oregon accounts for 36% of Deschutes County in-migration. California is 22%. The birth rate also during this time fell by 67% of those that lived here. So there are numerous household composition changes that are occurring between 2019 and 2023. We've had a 13% increase in total households. However, family sizes and household sizes have gotten smaller, and those without children have increased by 111%. Because our households are getting smaller, this indicates that we will need more housing units in the future. Comparatively, those living alone 65 years and older have also increased by 11%. Ben Lapine School District has 1,200 less students than it did in school year 18 and 19. So as we all know, the median household income keeps shifting to the right or to the more affluent, and that's because Ben's median household income grew by 7% since 2019. However, the largest growth occurred among those 120% AMI and above, and then households earning 80% AMI or less saw a 16% decrease. Based on the in-migration, this is our household median income changes are a direct result of more affluent individuals moving into the community. However, with more income moving in, this means that there is growing income inequality. The top 5% of households earn 24% of the total aggregate income of Bend. Bend's income inequality has increased more dramatically than Oregon or US. As you can see in figure 3, the top 5%'s income has continually grown substantially compared to the middle class, which has grown nominally. So 38% of our total households are renters. The average renter household earns around $65,000. In order to afford today's current multifamily rent, those renters will need to earn 4% more in income to not be cost burdened. Cost burden is spending more than 30% of your income on rent. If they wanted to afford a single family renter home, they'd need to make 33% more. Single family homes account for 59% of the total rental stock in Bend, hence why most of our renters are cost burdened. If those that wanted to own a home that were renters, they would need to earn 60% more in income in order to afford rent. Today's average homeowner earns around $117,000, but in order to afford today's current market rate rent, they need to earn 32% more with both mortgage and home value prices. So renters account for 38%, as I said, and homeowners account for 62%. This is a breakdown per neighborhood district for the average renter household. As you can see, most of the city is unaffordable to the average renter household. The 4 districts, both Aubrey Butte, Old Bend, Larkspur, and Southeast Bend, are affordable, but there is a caveat with that we want to call out. In these 4 particular neighborhood districts, there is affordable housing complexes, which skews the data. That doesn't mean that the average renter household could qualify for those, but because they are professionally managed properties, we have to include them in the overall assessment. The average rent for a multifamily unit in Bend has increased 3% since 2023. So fun fact, according to Smart Asset, the city of Bend has the best economy in the country. However, this is based on the employment rate, median earnings for workers, and a 3-year income growth. We do face some state challenges. We are ranked 44th in the country for best and worst states for business, CNBC in 2024. I know we just got in 2025, but in 2024, top states for business, we dropped to 36 for the economy. We dropped 34th for doing business. We dropped 48 for business friendliness. We dropped 37th for education, and we dropped 36 for workforce. With Nike layoffs and Intel's this year, Oregon is not recruiting new investments, but living off of investments from 1970s. And as the economy continues to shift, growing revenue challenges of the state will become more pronounced. So we have some new numbers compared to what you're in there. We recently got both Implan and Lightcast, which are economic data software. We actually have the GDP for Bend specific. So unlike yours and your thing, that was the MSA, but for Bend, which is 97701, 7702, and 7703, that's as granular as we can possibly get. Bend's economy grows substantially compared to both Oregon and the US. Bend has the fourth largest economy in Oregon, and it accounts for 74% of the Bend MSA's GDP. Bend currently has a lower inflation than the US city average. Bend's exports and imports, those that our industries export out of the community versus what we import into the community. Bend is a primarily import community. Bend has a $2.5 billion trade deficit in 2023. This is consistent since 2018. And the challenge with exports and imports, when you export your product to other regions, you bring in new money, which provides the opportunity for business expansion, higher wage job growth, and also new job creation. When you import, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing because households consume. But when you have a substantial trade deficit like Bend does, it can make our local economy weaker and more vulnerable to outside influences. We've seen that in 2008 and then also with the pandemic in 2020. Bend's annual unemployment rate was 4.24% in 2024. As you can see with the red line, we have seasonal surges of unemployment due to the over-reliance on seasonal workers. On a more positive note, between 2022 and 2023, there was a 31% increase in businesses continuing into the next year. 75% of all employment are with companies 100 employees or less, and our small businesses only had a 4% closure rate from 2022 to 2023, which is lower than the national average of 5%. In the graph, you'll notice business formation, which is those that just file the Secretary of State information, the business formation and registration. Business exit is those that are permanently closed, and the net businesses, what are the net new businesses increasing? So since 2016, we've had net new business formation in Bend. Bend has a greater business ownership diversification among race and sex than Oregon and Portland. Bend's minority population is highly entrepreneurial. So for 1 out of every 45 females who own a business in Bend. That's compared to 1 out of 105 in the state of Oregon. With minority-owned businesses, 1 out of 8 minority-owned businesses, 1 out of every 8 minority-owned individuals own a business. That's compared to 1 out of every 31 who own a business in Portland. Terms are identified by the U.S. Census. Minority-owned is defined as any person who identifies as non-white, non-Hispanic. Bend's commercial and industrial investment was 160% higher than it was in 2023. And as you can see, we've had positive business investments over the last 2 decades. Office space deliveries have declined. Substantial retail has been delivered, Costco and Jack Straw, and more industrial is being slowly delivered to the market due to limited land. So excess demand is anything that's being absorbed, both being delivered and then whatever the excess is after that. Commercial space, there is no high demand for current office space. That's indicative with the national market. Retail demand has drastically fallen, but that is because Costco is new. So there's 174,000 square feet open at Gateway North. By them relocating to the northern part of the city, it's opened up 154,000 of retail space on Highway 20. Industrial demand is contingent on many factors outside of just the space available. This can include the overall production price for the product that they're producing, local labor availability, and land cost. As you can see, Industrial has been pretty highly in demand since 2006, but has fallen off since 2023, but is rising in 2024. Last year, you saw the first iteration of how many people were commuted in, and also those that work from home. So it's it's increased by 0.8% since the last data point that you saw. So 51.8% of those that work in Bend are commuting outside of Bend. And then nearly 25% of individuals work from home. With the new numbers from ACS 1-year survey, it's actually 28.9%. So between 25 and 28.9% of those that work from home in Bend. 85% of Bend sectors saw employment growth. The largest growth of establishments occurred in professional and scientific, and the largest decrease occurred in administrative and waste management. However, despite some of these decreases, all sectors saw wage increases, with management of companies seeing the largest wage increase from 2019. This analysis doesn't include unclassified industries, which means anything that doesn't have a NACES code attached to it. From our friends at Visit Bend, they provided some consumer spending data. So in the state of the economy that you'll see in the next couple of weeks, you'll see household industry demand and then total consumer spending. Total consumer spending is basically what they spend for consumption. Household industry demand also includes debt payments, mortgages, savings, stuff like that. But anyway, total consumer spending is down 8% from 2023. Summer is when most spending occurs, obviously our tourist season. For an economy based on retail and tourism, which our retail and restaurant sectors employ 25% of our total workforce in Bend, this is a troubling trend. 56% of our spending is from locals, as well as bank deposits have declined by 1% since 2023. Overall, tourism is at its highest level compared to the last 5-year average, with May through October being our tourism season. So when we presented all this data, we come up with a problem statement that the focus group was asked to solve, or at least have a conversation, and we'll present that to you today. So starting, growing, and operating a thriving business is becoming increasingly challenging due to local, state, and national policies, from local impact fees and land cost, Oregon's increasingly regulatory and tax burdens, and national trade and monetary policies. What is essential for business growth and stability is to attract and retain a qualified workforce. While Bend is a highly desirable community that is rapidly growing, recent population growth has caused surging home prices and rent prices, rising income inequality, growing infrastructure deficiencies, and limited land development opportunities that is preventing this from becoming a reality. And so what ended up happening is we asked them, how would you solve? What's the vision you'd like to implement? And what are the guiding principles in which you'd like to see this problem being solved? And this is where in your staff packet, the first draft one of the vision is. Bend is a nationally competitive economic center in the Pacific Northwest with inclusive access to economic opportunities for all. The guiding principles are as follows: inclusive economic growth, where we prioritize economic and community investments that result in real opportunities for all residents. A supportive business environment that cultivates a place where all businesses find an attractive environment to start, grow, innovate, and thrive. Adaptable and innovative approaches to policies and investments that respond to business needs, market conditions, and community desire. Education and skills development that provide every resident access to a meaningful, family-sustaining career. And resilient and sustainable environment that provides an enduring economy that can adapt to shocks and disruptions while complementing our natural assets.
Lovely.
Well, you should have seen the first vision statement. They tore it up.
Made some revisions.
I'm impressed that you got to one.
Well, we'll see with draft 2, right? So.
When Cyrus first sent this out, I saw a slide in here that I had just glossed over, but when you explained it, I all of a sudden didn't really understand it. Can you go back to the one that talked about minority businesses, women owned?
Yep.
Had white on there, had other things.
Yep.
Can you go back to that?
Hold on 1 second.
When I first saw it, I thought the same thing you said, which is Ben looks good, but now when I looked at it again here, it looked like the opposite.
We have more of those than per individual than.
But the numbers were lower,
So you want them to be lower.
okay?
So
But the first statement at the top says 1 out of every,
45 females own a business.
okay? But it's 66.
No, Right. So,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
because if you have 1 out of every 1 females owning a business, that'd be a very,
Got it.
so the lower, you want the lower the number.
Yeah, I get it. The
And you,
golf score, got it.
Yeah. Better ratio.
and you said the minority owned is defined by the census as non-white and non-Hispanic?
Non-white, non-Hispanic, because there are some Hispanics that identify themselves as white, non-white. We just follow what they're, and this is from the statistics for employer firms by race and ethnicity and sex. And it's done in 2017 and 2022. So we could have better numbers, we could have lower numbers, but this is the data we got.
Before we get into kind of timelines and next steps, does anyone have any comments or feedback on the data or the first initial drafts of the vision and guiding principles?
So when you guys met and talked about the problem statement, did you then have is everything that is surrounded around that or the vision?
Oh, the vision.
And there was, what do you? There's some things on this problem statement that are not solvable by this community, not alone this board, but by this community. I mean, there's some things on there, it's just not. So I'm wondering if when you continue on from here, is the vision statement going to be what drives you? That's what I expected, not the problem statement.
Right, I think the problem statement was intended to be more comprehensive to say, we at least need to acknowledge all of these
That there's
components.
issues.
What is in our control and out of our control will be fleshed out in the strategy, but
Yeah.
that we need to at least pay attention to those things.
This isn't the final vision by no means, but it's,
Good, but you're getting closer. You're
They-
leaning in.
well, yeah, the first one was like 8 sentences.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't.
So one of the things that'll happen as we progress for this is there'll be certain parts of this strategy that are in our control that we lead. There'll be certain parts that we partner with others and support their efforts. Sound familiar, Sarah? And then the third part is, are we gonna monitor it and track it? But it really is much out of our control. Tariffs, for example, would be something in that category. So as you go through this, when you look between the problem and the vision, the problem statement should probably be honed over time and categorized, but for now, it's like, here's the world as it exists. The vision is, how does the city leverage who we are, what we do to deliver on some of those problems?
And some of these things we may not control ourselves, but I would hope, have some influence over those who.
Yes.
Even with just the state legislature control that.
Well, and to that point, that's what I took from the guiding principles that I appreciated was the adaptable, innovative approaches to policies and resilient and sustainable. So we have flexibility and agility to respond to what happens.
Yeah, the adaptable and innovative was actually brought up by the focus group themselves. So we started with inclusive, supportive, educative, and resilient. And then we kind of honed the definitions down, but they kept talking about adapting to tomorrow's problems because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So, and in speaking in our now economic development team, it's even though we have this 10-year vision, we don't know what's going to happen next year and the next 5, but it's an aspiration of what we want community to be in 10 years. But that's where the 5x2 strategy comes in of you have this big overarching 10-year goal, but you'll have a biennium approach to how do you accomplish it.
Nice work.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, so we have now 2 more focus group sessions. We know that the third one is going to be August 28th. So we have a little bit of time between now and then to further refine, and then a big piece of the engagement work over the next month and a half is going to be for the stakeholder interviews. We've asked EDCO and the chamber and some others to provide names or individuals in the community that they'd like to be included in that process. So we have the invitations and templates all dialed. It's just a matter of actually going out and doing these and tomorrow Katie and I have our first one with Grace Bio and Lisa Hill over there, so. That is gonna be a significant undertaking for our staff over the next several weeks.
And that's one of the reasons why we're a little bit delayed on, we should be like 60% done with our timeline, but we wanted to allow Katie to have the opportunity to add some input to the business survey and also participate if she wanted. So we kind of put that off for a little bit. In September though, you will see a draft SWOT analysis from all the things, and you'll get to provide feedback on what that is, and then also the key initiatives. So beginning in August, it's going to be work time for BDAB. So we weren't not coming to you. We just wanted to get all the data kind of put to bed first, and then have the industry clusters of where we wanted to do a recruitment. And then also, like to Jen's point, have references to our regional partners and documents. We are working with EDCO to see what their new economic development strategy is going to hold, and then also any other local strategic initiatives. And then in September, we'll do that business survey. So September, October, and November is where the plan really comes together, with December 3rd is the adoption date.
Any other comments on this?
Yeah, there was some of the focus groups, or there was blanks for needing help. Are you gonna, is that just gonna come from the focus group?
Yeah, we can do that now or via email. I think there were a couple of slots for BDAB members to participate in volunteering with different components if they would like to. But it's very much a voluntary situation.
Just wanted to point out that there was blank spaces there, so.
Yeah, there are three: broad engagement, goals and objectives, or strategic initiatives, and then document creation. We probably don't need BDAB members for document creation. We'll rely on our internal. If you've got pictures, that'd be great. Really nice pictures. But the broad engagement, we want to be able to run some survey questions by you and then help distill some of those results. And then the goals and objectives are, since this is a BDAB plan, are those the strategic initiatives and objectives that you're comfortable with owning in the next 2 to 5 years? So.
And Cyrus, was it the stakeholder interview questions that you ran by Jen and I?
Yeah, or it was Jennifer Gold from SBDC.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Now we're on to roundtable. Does anyone have any topics that they'd like to bring forward to the group?
No, is there, I mean, besides the, like, obviously, this plan is gonna be a big effort, is there anything else that should be on BDAP's radar, because you guys this in the fiscal year and a lot of planning stuff, so picking things back up and.
Yeah, policy related items is gonna be electrification, that will be coming back around. We're tentatively planned to have a work session for that topic in August. And then the plan is for Cassie Lacey, who runs our environment and climate program, to talk with council about options and give some further direction, and then bring that joint committee together of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, BDAB, and Environment and Climate Committee together to have more of a comprehensive conversation. So we'll make sure that this group is aware of those dates as they come into the fold, and probably have Cassie come back and give a presentation on the direction given from council to proceed. But then we'll need also some BDAB folks to volunteer to participate on behalf of the board when that joint committee meeting is set. That's, I would say, kind of the big item at this point, outside of the investment stuff.
Sorry, I don't remember the timing or when this was, but I participated with the council and several other groups like ours, and they acted like they would really enjoyed that and wanted to keep something like that going. Have you heard any more on that?
Yeah, I think the intent for that kind of advisory body summit, if you will, is to occur at the start of each biennium.
Okay.
So that'll be on
Kind of a
year basis.
once a year thing.
Probably 2 years, just with the
Once every
election
2 years.
cycle.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's a good way for advisory bodies to kind of cross pollinate, but also for our council to hear directly from the board about what their kind of aspirations and goals are for the biennium. So that I think is the intent, is to do that again. That was the first time we had done it, but that's my understanding. Yeah, but I think it was well received.
Yeah, and I think it was good to share information, like you say, between the different advisory groups.
Right. And the only other update I will provide is that we have interviews for the 2 open seats on VDAP this week. And we had a really strong application pool that I think we're happy about. And so Katie, Mayor Pro Tem Perkins, and Mayor Keebler and I will be sitting in on those interviews tomorrow and Wednesday morning.
Great.
And so hopefully by our next meeting or the meeting after, we'll have those seats already confirmed.
Cool. The anecdotal on the Invest Bend thing, but I didn't know anything about around the Bend Farms. Until I met Benjamin at the Invest Bend thing, but I went on tour this morning.
Oh, did you? That's great.
It just conceptually, I think those are the kind of things that we're talking about from that Invest Bend can bring. It's just that community engagement, like understanding what's going on, but they're nonprofit trying to help with food insecurity, so they're growing stuff kind of in. They've got a farm in Distribution Woods and another one in Culver currently, but they're also trying to spread that through the community with people with small plots of land or whatever, and help them kind of figure that out. But the conversation today, the Troy Fields came up, it would be an excellent place for a community garden area, or for them to help farm that, and I think it'd be awesome for the city to have that as a downtown feature.
I second they're a great organization.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think the community engagement component of the plan definitely takes a lot of time and effort and some resources, but I do think the outcomes are worth the cost. So
Yeah, for sure.
thank you for sharing that. Anything else? Okay, well, we'll give you 45 minutes. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.